Welcome everyone to our session this morning, Broadening Participation in STEM Education and Careers, Promising Practices and Resources. My name is Miles McNall, and I am the Director for Community Engaged Research in the Office of University Outreach and Engagement. After today's session, we want you to have a clear understanding of what it means to broaden the participation of underrepresented groups in STEM. What are some effective strategies for broadening participation? And who are some potential MSU partners that can advise you and help you meet your goals for broadening participation? We sent out a resources sheet of broadening participation partners and resources at MSU. Be sure to check that out. I am delighted to welcome our 4 panelists today. Joy Hannibal, who's the Assistant Director of Detroit M.A.D.E Scholars Program. Julia Libarkin, who is a professor, Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education, Head of the Geocognition Research Laboratory, and the GeoCafes Program Coordinator. Julie will be talking more about the GeoCafes program today. Emily Sorocci, who is the Associate Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and Stephen Thomas, Program Manager for Agap, CAFE, and SROP programs in the graduate school. So here's a brief overview of our session today. Stephen's going to be kicking it off by giving us an overview of NSF's broadening participation goal and helping us understand what that's all about. Then each of our panelists is going to give us an overview of the programs they run that are aimed at meeting that broadening participation goal. Then we're going to open up to a discussion among our panelists around 2 questions. What are promising practices for broadening participation in STEM? And what are their recommendations for how to partner with them or seek advice from them about broadening participation? Then we're going to open it up for questions and answers from our audience. And finally, I'll be asking you to complete a session evaluation form. And we take your evaluation comments very seriously and use them to improve the quality of the programs. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephen.
Thanks, Miles. So I'm now going to share my screen. Okay, great. So what I want to do is first start off by talking about NSF broader impacts and this, subtle nuances between broader impacts and broader participation or broadening participation. So in terms of broader impacts, there's like 4 main areas in which NSF looks at when evaluating various grants and projects. These include the educational space, inclusion, in which a lot of people are most familiar in terms of broadening participation, dissemination, and benefits to society. So first off with inclusion, when again, this is zeroing in on what most people are familiar with in terms of broadening participation. It is the inclusive participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities in STEM. And these could be people with many different walks of life and age groups. This include, high school and middle school students, undergraduates, graduate students, and postdoc, the various collaborators that you interact with, and also the leadership that you might have on your project teams. Now, to make sure that this broadening participation will be meaningful, as project leaders, you might want to incorporate some of these other dimensions of broader impacts as you include underrepresented persons in STEM, women, and people with disabilities. These can include the educational space, where you're improving STEM education and educative development at any level. This could mean involving curriculum development, K-12 educator engagement, undergraduate education, and citizen or community science. Dissemination could include increased public scientific literacy and public engagement with science and technology. This can involve participation in conferences, journals, and informal science education venues. In terms of societal benefits, this would include improving the well-being of individuals in society through either through your research or through your activities with broader impacts and broader participation. This can involve research that tackles societal challenges, improve life satisfaction of US citizens or citizens globally, training the next generation of high-tech employees and entrepreneurs, improved national security, improved or increased economic competitiveness of the United States, and enhanced infrastructure for research and education. So with that, hopefully that gives you at least some insight of the difference between broader impacts and the slight difference between broader participation, whereas broader participation is an inclusion of underrepresented groups, and that could be defined very broadly as it relates to NSF. So with that, I'll pass it over back to Miles, who will give us the run of show for our panel.
All right, thank you for that overview, Stephen. Next, we're going to have each of our 4 panelists talk about the programs that they run that are directed at the broadening participation goal. We're going to start with Joy Hannibal, and she's going to be talking about the Detroit M.A.D.E program. Joy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to get my slides started. And I'm actually going to talk about all the pathway programs, including Detroit M.A.D.E Scholars Program. So the Neighborhood Student Success Collaborative, it has 3 pathway programs. And those programs are Detroit M.A.D.E, TRIO, and Dow STEM. This is the staff for Detroit M.A.D.E. So myself, Joy Hannibal, I use she, hers pronouns, and then Taria Crank and Troy Villanueva are also on the staff. We also have peer mentors as well. So the eligibility for Detroit M.A.D.E Scholars Program is you must be admitted to Michigan State, and this is for each semester or each fall semester, we take in students. We are looking to take in students potentially for transfer and even after the fall semester if they're current students, but we're just looking into that right now. Graduates of Detroit public or charter schools or a resident of Detroit. They need to enroll in our first year seminar and then participate in our programs and meet with our staff. We also have a floor where students can stay in their first year in South Neighborhood. Here are our general goals. We hope to promote access to Michigan State, and so we do work with prospective students and admitted students to talk to them about what Michigan State has to offer and how Detroit M.A.D.E can support them. We want to engage them in a lot of different programming. So we have workshops and seminars with students, and we also coordinate with external and internal partners to put on those workshops. We also help students stay connected to Detroit. And so a lot of what we do, like our service learning projects, are within the city of Detroit. So we do have a lot of people that we do and companies, organizations that we work with in Detroit. And I also failed to say that the funding for the program came from the Gilbert Family Foundation. And that's just an overview of some of the programming we have. I wanted to move on to TRIO. So TRIO, this is their staff. We're all located in Bessie Hall on the 2nd floor between 2 suites. If you want to have a meeting, we're all here, and we do meet and bring in different speakers to talk with all of staff. TRIO is a program that has up to 600 students each year. It's a federally funded program to help first generation college students and low income students or the students with disability. Here are their general services. Much of the services look like the same across all of our 3 different programs. And so tutoring, workshops, seminar courses, The Dow STEM Scholars Program, this is their staff, Jung Lim Han and Janelle and Brittany. And so again, we're all located in Bessie, second floor. Their eligibility, Dow STEM is a program to help students stay within STEM. This is for students who place into intermediate college algebra. And so there are some courses that they'll have over the summer to help them with their math and also with their science courses. And so the program outcomes for Dow STEM, I'm going to briefly go through. This is increase the number of STEM graduates, decrease time to degree. They provide a lot of high impact practices. So that's like research focus areas, internships are some of the things that they provide in the high impact practices. And so they, like the other programs, have tutoring, they have programming as well with their students. And then this is just a summary of all of our programs. We all each have our emails, and I just encourage you all to go ahead and contact us if you'd like to partner with us.
Thank you, Joy. Next, we're going to hear from Emily Sorocci.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you for having me today. I'm just excited to talk about this with you and just to share my perspective. I've been having a lot of conversations with folks in the college here, and just really trying to diversify and understand why Native students may or may not be seen in your classes and in out in various ways in your work. So again, my name is Emily Sorocci. I'm the Associate Director in ODEI in the College of Ag and Natural Resources. A little bit more about myself. This is, some of my affiliations currently. I am acting as advisor right now to NASO. I've been doing that work for the past 5 years. And there's a new person that'll be coming in and taking over the role. So I'm excited for that transition. And I've also been a part of NASO for my undergraduate career and graduate career. So I've been at Michigan State for quite some time. I also do some work at the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College. And so I do carry some of that knowledge with me as well. There are a lot of different memberships, and I state those memberships because those are relationships with throughout the state that I also, consult with and possibly refer folks to. Just a little bit more about the MSU community, if you're not familiar with. This is off of the American Indian and Indigenous Studies website. These are just all of the kind of organizations that are here at Michigan State. And so a lot of us will refer you to this, to who have you talked to, who do you have relationship with, what are you aware of? So this is just kind of a stepping stone for your learning, that if you're not aware, that take a look at this website and become a little bit more familiar. I think one of the things that, especially when we're talking about, I bring in land acknowledgement. I think about this in a context of how we're approaching this work, especially with if we're planning to say them, if we're planning to, kind of have a relationship with the land acknowledgement, the relational piece is so important to this work. There have been times where I've read grants or have been talked to about grant participation, and that's the first time I'm meeting you. Or it could be, in passing, for example, having that conversation. I think, it requires a little bit more research on the either the grant writers or however you're entering into a relationship, a little bit more research on what you're wanting to do with this. Sometimes I do see, practice of Indigenous knowledge or epistemologies are going to be within the grant too, and there needs to be a reciprocal relationship within that. So that's something that I'm sorry, I'm having a pop-up window come up. And so that's just one of the things I wanted to acknowledge and bring into the conversation is understanding what that relational means to you, and to the work that you're planning to do. Just to give you, a perception of where we're at currently, this is on 2020. This is strictly American Indian and Indigenous students on campus over the past 20 years or so. And the enrollment with undergraduate students. So we're kind of at we're starting to slowly go up, but there's a lot of historic things that have happened with the passing of the Michigan Indian Tuition Waiver, and it excludes First Nation people. And then you have the Proposition 2 passing of the affirmative action. So those things did impact. And then also the 2 or more race indication that also had an impact on how Indigenous students identify and self-identify. And then you have those that don't identify at all because of the mistrust of how this information will be used. So there is that, kind of historical trauma that shows up in different ways. So it makes the work that much more important and that much more delicate in how you're entering into these relationships. Some advice that I'll part with you are the next few slides and some of my research and from my doctoral program. So working with Indigenous communities, you're going to want to participate. Like I mentioned earlier, that's the first time I'm meeting you, but I'm going to invite you to things next. I'm going to hope that you would show up to these things as well, because I want to know that it's not performative, because sometimes we get that as well as and so participating by showing up shows to me that you're actually putting some kind of feet to your words, right? Building that trust. So now I want to be able to trust that you're going to do something with the information that we're sharing, especially if we're opening up the community to you. It's a lot of that kind of coffee talk, right? Spending that time with me to get to know how the work is going to be received. Historical understanding. So that's the other piece, like doing your research on why this is so delicate in your area, why this is so challenging and tough. So that also is very important. Listening to learn and not to respond, right? So a lot of, hearing our stories and understanding that, not to listen to hurry up and say something, right? And also it takes time. I know that, with grants and whatnot, you're on a timeline. I get that. I understand. But also these relationships are very important to the work. So if that means extending it, if that means you're going to have to start a little bit earlier on doing these relationships and figuring out how to work that trust out, then I would encourage you to do that. Just some things, especially when you're thinking about having Indigenous students within your programs, when you're admitting them, when you're really nurturing that and guiding them through, identifying those key people to maintain those relationships with, right? It has to be within the college. That's very important, especially if you have folks that are doing such good work. That could be a reference person for that student to continue to have a connection with. Culturally responsive programming is so important. Incorporating these things within your teaching and within the work. Like, for example, having students use the language within their writing, or some of their customs or values, for example, using that as research content and in the writing too. So that's important for that connection to be had. Knowledge of resources, like that website that I showed you with the American Indian and Indigenous Studies program, knowing that is a community here, knowing what that is, what it encompasses, because hopefully you may have went to an event, visited with some folks, maybe you have some relationships with folks that are faculty and staff inside that program, and referring them to that as well is important as you're working with Indigenous students. And then also making time for that transition. This is tough, and a lot of students have trouble with transition and understanding that it's not something that happens overnight. And so it happens over time. And so creating space for that transition, that can mean mentoring opportunities, informal or formal, what have you, and also knowledge when scholarships are pumping through, that you pass that good knowledge on. And I have some, works cited and resources that I can share with y'all. But that's pretty much what I had today.
Thanks so much, Emily. Next, we'll hear from Julie Libarkin.
Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen and then get my PowerPoint in the share mode. So I am super excited that Joy and Emily both talked about relationships. Oh, am I frozen? Okay, there I am. Both talked about relationships and relationship building, because that's in fact clearly one of the most important things that we can do and that we have to do in order for this work to occur. So I'm going to talk to you today about one example project that is sort of a case study of what it looks like to engage in broader impacts through federal funding. So Michigan State University, Northeastern Illinois University, and GeoLatinas, which is a nonprofit organization, are funded to run the GeoCafes program. It's a National Science Foundation program. And one of my colleagues is good at names, so we're the Communities and Future Earth Scientists program, GeoCafes, focused on supporting and promoting Latinx participation in the earth sciences in particular. Like a lot of disciplines, we have multiple groups who are underserved. So we heard about multiple communities. So for example, Emily just talked about Native American communities being underserved, and Latinx communities are similarly underserved. So we already had strong relationships with the leaders of GeoLatinas and also with Northeastern Illinois University, which is a Hispanic serving institution. And so based on those existing relationships and strong trust and connections, we were able to build this program. If we wanted to build this program but didn't already have those relationships, it either wouldn't be fundable or more likely it might get funded, but it wouldn't be as successful as it has been. So I just want to share with you what it looks like to institute broader impacts in our programs. So GeoCafes, I'm going to tell you what it is. So GeoCafes is many things. The core of it is a 10-week summer bridge program, which I've heard a lot of people around campus talk about. Lots of these sorts of get students doing research, gain research experience, build collaborations and strong relationships with faculty, and that sets students up for success in future careers. In the earth sciences, we really intersect with lots of different kinds of disciplines. And so we're looking for students who maybe have a focus in earth science, but even more than that, are focused in science broadly construed, ag science, social science, other natural sciences, engineering, and show them how what they do in their disciplines actually intersects with the geosciences. So these are two examples of projects. So here's someone who's doing a project on ancient climates, and they're actually out on the ocean and they're doing lots of modeling. And so someone with a mathematics background, for example, might work on that project. We have another one. Matt Schrank is the principal investigator of GeoCafes. I'm a co-principal investigator. And he does geomicrobiology. So a biologist can learn how their biological understanding, actually genetic analysis, can be used in understanding the Earth system. The collaboration with GeoLatinas is particularly important because that is a community of Latinx people or Hispanic or Chicano, however they identify, or people who strongly support that community. And really anybody's allowed to be engaged or is welcome to be engaged. But because we have that collaboration, they already have lots of mentoring and other programs that are going on. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to decide as people who are not Latinx, and this is going to be true for many of you here. You are not necessarily going to be a member of the community that you want to collaborate with. And so I'm not Latina, Matt Schrank, the PI, is not Latino, neither are any of the other PIs except for the head of GeoLatinas. And it's very, very important to, I say, step forward to listen to what a community is asking for, and then step behind to have that community lead you in doing the labor. And so this program was developed in response to what GeoLatinas was telling us people needed. And the program is evolving in response to what the students who are participating are telling us they need. I want to show you the team. And I just want to say this is Julie's COVID hair. I just wanted you to see it. We were doing a lot of this on Zoom. And in fact, our internship last summer was completely virtual. And we actually found that that allowed for greater participation by the most underserved students who maybe need to be doing work on their campuses and can't quit in the summertime. So we're going to continue with that virtual opportunity for those students who really need to be able to do research while also maintaining other obligations. So we learned in response to what our students were telling us. The last thing I wanted to show you is that there needs to be a lot of intentionality in these programs, and it can't just be as Emily said and as Joy said, I'm going to partner with a group and I'm going to make something happen. We as people who aren't part of those communities or don't have those same lived experiences can't really decide what's needed. And so we provide research mentoring, career mentoring, academic mentoring, and psychosocial mentoring. The research literature shows those are very important, but even more than that, the kind of mentoring that we provide is responsive to what the students say they need. And on top of that, because we know that most of us were not trained to effectively engage with communities or mentor students, we do a lot of training of the mentors to hopefully make sure that the mentoring is responsive to what the individuals we want to serve in this program are getting. That's it.
Thanks so much, Julie. Next, we're going to hear from Stephen Thomas about the programs that he operates for the graduate school.
Thanks, Miles. So now I'm going to share another set of slides. And the slides I'm going to share with you now, I want to focus on two main programs, the Agap program and the SOP program. So within the Agap program, I'm going to share with you three pillars or modes of activity in which we're looking for faculty to engage with us. And then I'll sort of like close with the Summer Research Opportunities Program. So the Agap program, and that stands for the Alliance for Graduate Education Professoriate. It was started with funding at Michigan State with funding from the National Science Foundation. Michigan State has since then institutionalized many of the programming since our initial grants. The program targets underrepresented groups or minority students that are graduate students or postdoc trainees from across campus. So that includes both the STEM and the social sciences, and even students from the arts and humanities. This provides a forum for faculty and student exchange through our monthly learning community meetings. Because of the pandemic, we've been alternating between 100% virtual and hybrid and in-person meetings as the cases go down in our campus. But also it provides opportunities for students and trainees for leadership through our peer-led publications, including our Agap Science Today Bulletin, and also our inaugural Agap Grad School Survival Guide. One of the hallmarks of the program that we're really excited to share with you is that we have a high retention rate of our members. On any given year, we have about 250 active members, and today we have over 500 alumni that are working across the country. Now that I share with you some information about the Agap learning community in general, I'm going to now go in more detail in terms of the Agap Student Success Conference. That usually happens in the fall, either October or weekend in October or November. This year is hovering around October is what our next meeting date will be. We've grown from a regional conference to a national convening of diverse undergrads, grad students, and postdocs. So not only do we invite students from the original Michigan Agap Alliance, but also students and grad students from other Agap Alliances, and also undergrad students from McNall and M.A.D.E and various specialized programs. Faculty, you can participate as judges, speakers, recruiters, or even workshop attendees. Recruitment opportunities for graduate students, postdoc, and faculty, because we cast such a wide net of participants, you can showcase the many different opportunities your department or program has to offer. We typically have a Friday that's set up exclusively for Michigan State programs, but then Saturday we open it up for not only just Michigan State recruiters, but also recruiters from other universities, programs, and employers. All right, so now I'm shifting gears to another program that I manage through Agap, which is the grant writing workshop specifically for the JFP. So this fellowship is sponsored by the National Science Foundation. Undergrad seniors and first and second year grad students can apply. This is open for all, MSU students. We also target our, partner institutions, minority serving institutions from across the country to participate as well. So our annual workshop attendee or attendance hovers around 120 students every year. And then also we invite our Schwab alumni to participate in this workshop series as well. And I'm going to go on more about the SOP program in the next slide. It's opportunities for faculty that we encourage you to pair or to introduce yourself to the undergrad participants as a potential recruitment opportunity in terms of the research activities that are going on at MSU. Our Save the Date work will occur next month, where we'll spread the word broadly, and that the workshop series is a 5-part workshop series, and it occurs between mid-September to the beginning of October to help students get ready for their October deadline for this grant. One of the things that makes our workshop unique is that the students will receive individualized coaching as a part of the workshop. So not just receiving lectures and being talked at them, but they're also engaged with each other and receive that coaching as well. All right, so now I'm going to now talk about another program that I manage called the Summer Research Opportunities Program. As faculty and grant leaders, you can participate as a research mentor, participate in our in-person or virtual networking sessions, also participate as poster judges or presentation judges, also work at or participate as a short course instructor. As the program has now evolved, we include, in addition to the research experience, also short course immersions on given topics that gives the department an opportunity to showcase some unique learning that attendees are able to experience if they decide to come here for graduate study, and also give you an opportunity to showcase and recruit students to your programs. So these occurring during the first 2 weeks of May, whereas the research component happens for the months of June and July. And also for those of you that currently have existing ROU programs, we're excited to collaborate with you, whether it's during our professional development programming and social events that we have, and also in terms of our participating in our housing block, so our students can interact with each other informally outside of the programming. So let me share with you some program outcomes and demographics. We have definitely increased our applications to our graduate programs within MSU over these past 10 years. Some of the opportunities, and also increased our opportunities for departmental engagement. So for the past 3 years, we've we started off with like 91 interns before the pandemic. In 2020, we had to quickly pivot as we went to a virtual component for 28 students, but then did an uptick toward our 60 student average of 61 students last year. And our average GPA is around a 3.5, whether it's been in person or virtual. Over 80% of our students identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, and 68% of our students are students within the STEM fields, and the other percentage are students in the social sciences. We also recruit students nationwide, and I'll go a little more detail in terms of that in the next slide. In terms of our cohort, last summer, 80% of our students have been on the Dean's List. 73% of our students express an interest in going to graduate school. Many of our students are first-generation students, and almost half of our participants, this was their first mentored experience. Again, we covered a wide cross-section of students from across the country, both in the types of institution, but also the home state in which the students were coming from. We had students as far as west as, you know, California and Arizona, but also we get students as far as east as, you know, the Virgin Islands or the University of Puerto Rico system. In terms of next steps, for those of you who are interested in leading a short course for the next upcoming cycle, you know, feel free to send me an email. We also have a couple slots open for those of you that know of a great candidate who might be interested in the SOP program this summer. We're doing the program virtually this year with the hopes that we'll be back in person in 2023. And that if you're interested or available to mentor a Schwab student either this year or next summer, we look forward to you to share with a couple sentences of your research activities using this link that you see on this slide. And I'll put that link in addition to the links to the Agap and Schwab programs in the chat shortly after my presentation. So with that, actually, that's actually my last slide. So I'll stop there and I'll pass the mic back over to Miles and then put that information I promised you in the chat.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to all the panelists for giving us that great overview of the variety of programs that are at MSU related to the NSF broadening participation goal. What we're going to do now is open it up for a discussion among our panelists around two key questions. So the first question is, what are promising practices for authentically broadening participation of underrepresented groups? So by that, I mean, you know, programs that are welcoming, that are inviting, that create a sense of belonging, and that affirm participants' cultural identities, rather than just checking a box. Who would like to take that question first? Well, why don't we go in the order that we presented in, if no one jumps in. So let's start with Joy.
So what are some promising practices? I think for programs and specifically, I think our support programs are here. We definitely are engaged with our students, know what our students are interests are. We just need to help them connect them, build their network. And I think some things that I have been able to be a part of. I used to work for the College of Veterinary Medicine, and we would have faculty actually come to workshops or come to our supplemental instruction, where students not only saw our coaches, our supplemental instruction coaches speak to or lead the supplemental instruction, but they also saw them engaging with faculty and bringing faculty. And it was like once a semester, but I think it helps students be more comfortable with going to faculty members, to building relationships beyond just the class. So they were able to talk about research. They were able to talk about other ways that they can get involved. And so engaging with students on this level, I think is important.
Thanks, Joy. Emily?
Thank you. I think it goes back to some of the points that I made earlier is with, you know, participating and how that looks for you and defining that, especially with community and Indigenous communities. If you're thinking about tribal nations, you know, getting to know folks that are within those roles is important. If you're looking at tribal colleges, you know, meeting with folks and really understanding and listening and not coming in with the mentality of I'm here to fix something, you know. So I think that's huge because I'll hear that a lot. It's a theme almost in some meetings. And so I have to kind of, you know, peel the onion back a little bit more and really, you know, understand. There's this workbook that I'm going to put in the chat for everyone. I thought it might be helpful, especially if this is kind of your first time walking through something, and it's in the resources that I'll share. But it really kind of slows down and it makes you reflect on how you're moving through this kind of ask, or if that's something you're hoping for in the near future, but to start on that way early. So really understanding what relationship means to you, and also ask that question to other people too that you're getting to know. I think that's really some of the promising practices that I can think of, just kind of going back to the basics of relationship building and communication and how that all goes down, and creating that sense of belonging is so important. If we're kind of building a program to include folks that may have not been here before, think about how that feels when you're kind of disarmed and you're kind of breaking those boundaries of not having cultural norms every day. So it's different, for some, and I can only speak from my perspective and in my experience. I can't generalize for everybody too. So I wanted to note that. I forgot to mention that earlier. But those are just some things that I think about when I hear promising practices.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for sharing that resource. And I believe there's also the Native American Institute created a guidebook for working with Indigenous communities. If you could drop that link in there, that would be wonderful.
I just threw it in there.
You did? Thank you.
Yeah, because as Emily was talking, I'm like, oh, the partner to that is the research one.
Yeah, that's a terrific resource too.
These are both great resources. That whole student book is also awesome.
What are your thoughts, Julie?
Well, so I have a couple of thoughts. I want to challenge people to think about if we have individual students or groups of students who are underserved in our spaces. And that's pretty much true of most spaces at MSU, and broadly in our disciplines. Again, if 35 to 40% of our population are non-white and or Hispanic, okay, and the vast majority of our community is white, middle class, upper class, able-bodied, heteronormative, et cetera, we really need to ask ourselves, why are our spaces not diverse yet? I would argue that diversity is a signal of equity in our underlying systems. And so one of the things that I see happen is people sort of smear diversity on top of an already existing structure. And then we just continue to have a lack of equity and justice in our spaces. And so a promising practice, and you'll hear me go off about this because I love this, it really goes back to what Joy said, and it goes back to what Emily said. You have to focus on community, building relationships, building as much trust as is possible where there are power differentials, but building some trust. And for me, the biggest promising practice is think about how much time you spend building relationships with the people in your disciplinary community, going to conferences, having speakers, phone calls, coffees, et cetera, et cetera. You should be spending that much time or more building the same kind of relationships with those communities that you want to be working with, not on. And I'll just give a quick story. So my graduate student, Sophia Huss, who is white, middle class, et cetera, really, really wants to work with Indigenous communities in extractive resource spaces. And so we've been doing all sorts of community engaged work, but one of the things that she's been doing, which I just learned so much from my students, she started going to the Nakoma Center and she's learning Anishinaabe, So she's making an effort to go and listen and observe what community building looks like in that space. And so as an example, she got wild rice and she made a dish to pass. And she knows the elders there now, and I think has some trust with them. And so when it comes time for her, if it ever comes time for her to go to those elders and say, hey, I've got a project and I need some assistance, they already have a relationship. And so it isn't asking someone you don't know to do something for you that you've decided is of value. She's able to go in and say, we've discussed this already. How about we do something that's reciprocal and helpful for all of us? To me, building the community and the relationships is most important.
Great insights, Julie. Stephen?
Yeah, I would just echo some of the many sentiments that my colleagues just mentioned in terms of building relationship and building community amongst your colleagues, like many of us on this panel. The thing I would mention, or be more specific, is that it would be great to begin to engage us as early as you think that the collaboration might exist. So, for example, like in the fall, as you have faculty meetings or advisor meetings, feel free to invite us to speak to your colleagues in departments. So as we get ready for either our fall or summer events, that we've already start building a level of rapport. The other thing I would mention in terms of when approaching the students that our program sort of represent, consider seeing the work that we do as talent scouts versus as sometimes when people want to like help, sometimes subconsciously sort of approach the students from a deficit model, regardless of their GPA. I would humbly suggest that to see those students as having the talent that you would sort of like expect from students at large. So I think just having that kind of mindset as you approach students that are underrepresented, I think it's sort of like will spill over in terms of how you mentor them, how you communicate with students, and that the students will actually respond in kind and know that they're just feel a sense of trust and authenticity.
Thank you, Stephen. Great points. Any other thoughts from our panelists before we move on to the next question? Anything bubble up? Okay, if not, then the next question is, so let's say there's a faculty member out there who's really interested in these broadening participation goals. They want to get involved, and they're thinking about partnering with you, potentially giving you a call, sending you an email to find out how they might do that. What's your advice to them on how to go about approaching that building that relationship with you and the people you serve? Any volunteers to go first, or are we going to put that burden back on Joy again?
I'll go. I'll take one for the team.
Right.
So I think I was just recently had conversations about advice and things like that. And that's how I would kind of approach it at first, is to get to know the respective person that you're thinking about asking, and then also kind of understand maybe where they're coming from first before, and how maybe somehow how their work aligns with yours before the ask. And then I say work on the relationship first, because if I were to be asked, if you invited me to a meeting and I were to be asked right off the bat, I probably would say no, because I don't really know what your intentions are. I don't know how you're going to use the information, and I don't know how. I need to see some of your evidence as well. Do you have good relationship with folks? So that's also kind of a tough question to answer in a first meeting because you're going to take the defense, let's be honest. And so it's really, kind of, we have to get to know each other in a way where I can begin to trust how you're going to use that information and do this important work. Because trust me, there's support to be had, and we want students to feel that this is a welcoming space to come to thrive. But right now we have to work on our relationship. We just hosted a town hall with some of the emerging needs of Indigenous students that are here on campus, and there are demands that are being facilitated throughout campus right now. And so there's some work that still needs to be done in order to retain our students, to graduate them. And so those are areas that we're hoping to receive support in as well. But I think that's how I would best answer that question.
Thanks, Emily.
I think for the support programs, the pathway programs, we are definitely available to meet. I think in developing those relationships. We are existing because we want to help students navigate the institution, to navigate their careers. And we ourselves as staff are not knowledgeable in everything. We are trying to develop relationships with people so that we can refer students. And so I think when a meeting is helpful, getting information up front in an email, whether it's websites or documents that give us a little bit of background so that we can prepare and understand what the agenda for that meeting is going to be. And maybe this, my answer here will also add to that first question, but just really understanding our programs. So I briefly run over all the 3 programs, but we have interaction with prospective students. So these are students K through 12 who we're talking to in presentations before they even apply to MSU. And then we also talk with admitted students. And I just recently talked to an admitted student who was interested in research in STEM, and being able to connect students to what might be available, what opportunities there are, and who we are connected to, people who we are connected to is important. This was a current student right now, sibling, who brought her to us because of the trust that they have in our program, because of the relationships that we have built. So we build relationships with the schools, with community organizations. We work with Upward Bound, with Gear Up, all these K through 12 programs that then we can also connect students based on a myriad of things that you all might be doing. So there's opportunity. And then of course we have our students who are here on campus and supporting them. And so we try to connect them to research, to seminars, to workshops. And so there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that will happen through relationship building so that you all know who we are and we know who you are, and meeting together and figuring out what are some opportunities that we can engage in partnership.
And one of the thoughts that came to me is, it takes time to build relationships, and so you don't want it to be a last-minute request. Like the broadening participation part was something you thought of 2 weeks before the proposal was due. For Julie and Stephen, maybe if you could address the question of timeline, and Emily and Joy too, after Julie and Stephen have gone. Stephen, would you like to pick it up now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Miles. So in terms of, I was going to defer to Julie, but I guess I was kicked under the table. So in terms of response to that question, in terms of timeline, it's ideal to start the conversation in the fall, in terms of while we're in a little bit of a lull in terms of our programming, but shortly right after, I sort of get kicked off into recruitment mode and building, for our workshops, conferences, and then some initial planning for SHROP. And in the spring semesters, when we start the selection process for various interns, for those of you that are interested in either hosting a SHROP student or having your RU collaborate with us, it'll be really great to hear from you from any time between November to February. Even though right now we still won't necessarily turn people away, it will just make logistically a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. So because many of you, this might be the first time you might have heard our respective programs, but we're still willing and excited to engage in conversation. Now, in terms of Agap and getting your students or postdocs engaged, we have programming throughout the academic, the calendar year. So it's never too late or too early, to get your students engaged. In terms of the fall conference and GFP workshop, those are typically ran in the fall in October, November. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of idea of the sort of like the cadence in terms of how we manage the calendar.
Thanks, Stephen. Julie?
So again, I'm speaking from the perspective of someone with multiple federal grants that look at engaging with diverse populations, underserved students. One thing that I would encourage folks to do, so there are all of these programs on campus to collaborate with, and I strongly encourage collaborating with them rather than trying to reinvent something that already exists. I think that's really important. And I can give you examples of faculty working on projects who are like, oh my goodness, there's a Native American student pop group on campus. There is like that, and where they needed to know that ahead of time. So it's good to do that homework early on. The other thing I wanted to tell you though, is that in terms of timelines, we often think about building, either we write a proposal to work with underserved populations, or we make it an added piece of the broader impacts of our projects. And I wanted to encourage people to look into mechanisms that funding agencies have to provide about a year's worth of funding for people to initiate these sorts of projects as an incubation. So I recently got an explicit incubation grant for a year to work with Indigenous and other communities in Michigan to build a certain kind of project that has to do with geology. That year allowed us to then develop the large grant proposal that really did incorporate all of the multiple perspectives. And so not only should you start early, but you might even start a whole year early in incubating the relationships that you need to build in order for this to work to be effective. That said, Joy and Stephen and Emily and others at MSU already have those relationships. And so they know best what it looks like to build trust with them, as Emily said, so she feels comfortable then opening those spaces up to all of us. Did I say that right, Emily? I didn't want to. Okay. And I keep calling you Emily. I hope that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other thoughts that bubble up for you, panelists, before we move to Q&A? So one of the really good pieces of advice someone gave me about this matter was, let's say you're approaching Emily and you say, I really want to work with Indigenous undergraduate students. Well, that you ought to have a pretty good answer to why and what's in it for them. Any thoughts on that sort of advice?
I think I would probably want to hear a little bit more on why you have those thoughts, or where your research came from as well. Because sometimes it was hard, especially in my studies, to find articles written by Indigenous peoples. And so to hear, kind of a firsthand experience and how that could be, especially for undergraduate students, I'd want to hear a little bit more about that and to hear where you got your knowledge and your research from. And then to kind of, be able to have a conversation on some of the issues that are being experienced by our students too, I think. And then also to know how your relationship will be afterwards, I think is important to think about too. If you are doing work for Indigenous students, I would hope that you would want to meet them and come to their meetings and build a relationship with them so that you're hearing firsthand as well. And then to have that relationship, because it's hard when folks just drop in and then leave, and then we don't hear or know anything. We don't have any follow-up. That kind of mishap is something that I would really try to prevent, and kind of try to get that out in a conversation with you. Like, how can I understand what your intentions are, is probably all of them are good, but it's the follow through piece afterwards. And that's the piece that we have trouble with. And we have to kind of improve and grow from those kinds of experiences.
Any final words of wisdom? Oh, Stephen, go ahead.
I was just going to dovetail what Emily just mentioned in terms of follow through. One of the things that a lot of our successful mentors do is that after the students participate in the SOP program, but they also engage the interns during the fall semester. Because one of the goals is to get students excited about getting an advanced degree. So how are you planning to help the students through the application? Do you introduce them to some of your colleagues that might be looking for grad students? What kind of funding opportunities do you help expose them to maybe consider MSU or another location, for that advanced degree? Many of our students might be invited to co-author a journal article or a book chapter after their summer internship. Now, granted, that will vary based on the project and the student's availability, of course, but I guess what the thing I'm trying to get at is that you can see the intern more than just an extra pair of hands, but you can see them as a budding scholar that you're trying to cultivate. And how does that, what that might look like after the formal 10 or 12 weeks, but how do you keep that relationship going during the fall and during the spring semester afterwards?
Any other thoughts before we open it up to questions and answers? Okay, participants, let's use hand raising. If you have a question for one of our panelists, just click on the reactions button down at the bottom of your screen and click raise hand. Or alternatively, you could just unmute yourself and speak. Very quiet group this morning.
Can I ask a question, Miles?
Yes, please.
So I'm really curious about the folks who are here, why they're here, and if they have a specific project in mind, or if they're just here for general, just to learn more about broader impacts in general. Because I wonder if there's a specific project in mind that they might be able to get some feedback and guidance right now.
Mm-hmm. Great suggestion, Julie. Any brave people out there who are willing to turn their camera on and ask a question?
We are worse than students. Oh,
There's a
Daniel.
brave person.
Hello. Yeah, really enjoyed all the content. And so one of the things that I'm kind of toying around, or one idea that I'm toying around with is like developing children's books to introduce them to the world of protein engineering, getting a better idea of how, these tiny biological particles are, part of our immune system, but also can be like taken out and make changes to them and use them for other clinical purposes. Yeah, and so that's kind of the idea in general. And yeah, I guess I'll kind of just like leave it open at that, as far as that's the gist of it. And so I guess another reason as far as like for coming here was just to get a better idea of like, yeah, the resources that are available, because that was a big piece of encouragement was what was echoed a couple of times I think in this presentation was just to not reinvent the wheel. And so if there's already people kind of involved with that, I've met with some folks that are part of the early childhood development program here at MSU, and that's been really helpful. But yeah, just trying to get a better idea of what other resources exist.
Now, if I could just, sort of chime in in response to Daniel's project, for example, you can imagine how that activity or project could be a research project, which a a student can engage the general public or K-12 educators or children in terms of how are certain like word choices or pictures, resonate more or less with students. And then the Agap conference could be a venue in which you can sort of like showcase the findings to not only students, but also policymakers and K through 12 educators.
Very, very nice. Thanks.
See, Elizabeth has her hand up. Elizabeth, if you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I didn't want to jump on Daniel's. I just was going to also share mine. So I don't know if there was any other comments on his.
I have a quick comment for Daniel before you go, Elizabeth. Daniel, I actually, so I'm one of the APA studies core faculty, and we had an APA studies symposium last Friday. And Noreen Nassim Rodriguez was one of the speakers. She is a scholar of children's literature. And she talked about representation within children's literature, specifically about Asian Americans, but also talked broadly about it. But I am just trying to think of, there's a lot of other scholars that you might be able to refer to in terms of informing your book as well. So I'll put her name in the chat, but she provided some information about children's literature at that talk. Really good information.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you all so much for presenting today. This has been really helpful. So I have submitted a career proposal twice. This will be my third year submitting, and each year have been able to sort of bolster the broader impacts and make more connections. And, so I just wanted to reassure everybody, it does take a lot of time, but especially if you have multiple submissions, you can sort of build that up over time, because it's hard in the fall to have your project all in place and know what questions to even ask. And so I have two educational activities that I think are relevant here. One, like I love Daniel's idea of working on children's books. I had proposed creating a card game that gets parents and kids talking. My project is about parent-child communication around STEM education and STEM interests of the child. There's been a lot of work on the importance of parent support of STEM interests, but very little work on what else parents do. Like, do they marginalize their kid for being interested in STEM, or sort of disengage with them, or challenge them, right? Or kind of push them to succeed. And my specialty area is family communication. So very interested in how parents are doing that. And I proposed, my research part is on undergraduate students, and then also people in STEM careers, sort of looking back at what their parents did and kind of looking at how they've, how their career journey has turned out. And so my education activities are that card game, getting parents to sort of discuss about STEM education and options, and just raise visibility of different types of people doing STEM work, and also all the different careers that are STEM related, because in a lot of families, if you don't have a mom that's an engineer, it's hard to imagine those things. And so part of that project is engaging with the community to make sure the game is representative and helpful to the populations that I am hoping will use the game. And one of the challenges I found with that is I can't just, call up some schools and say, hey, can we try out my game at your school? Like, there's just, that's not, no school is going to agree to that, me being someone unknown. And so I've been able to work a little bit with the people in STEM Ed they do some preview days for students and do some work with K-12 folks to get them interested in STEM at MSU. But the feedback I got on my career this time was, my project is very much focused on Black and Latinx parents and children, trying to get, understand and collect data from those populations. And they say, like, well, if you're just showing this stuff at MSU through the MSU events, you're not getting enough diversity. You need to go to the populations that could really benefit from this. And one reviewer even wrote in very helpfully, I know you're not very far away from Detroit. Like, why aren't you utilizing some of the community resources there. And so my big challenge this year, I think, is to try to connect more with those groups and people who can reach participants there, but I am really unsure where to start. And the second, just really quick, the second thing I propose is doing a parent workshop. So developing, based on my findings, a workshop for parents to help them understand how to sort of best practices for communicating with their kid. And same thing, I said I would do this at some like parent orientation kind of stuff at MSU, and the same feedback, right? Like just doing this at MSU isn't enough. So trying to reach out beyond the people we have here.
I guess if I would start, I guess I would say that there's a lot of people within the College of Ed and also the College of Ag that do some wonderful high school, outreach. Joy was mentioning in terms of high school outreach that she does, and in doing that prospective student outreach, they're interacting with parents, high school counselors, advisors all the time. I think there's definitely some key people, at MSU to help plug you in, to various cities, not just Detroit, but also in that backyard in Lansing, as well, to consider in terms of having to widen, the net that you hope to cast. Also, I think, and I'm probably getting the acronym wrong, but I think it was like the Michigan Reading Association just held a conference here at MSU a couple days ago. And they were just talking about how teachers can use some evidence-based approaches to reach students and parents. So I think, the work that you're proposing and some of the work that, that Daniel was mentioning can fit into those kind of conversations that those associations are trying to have with parents and teachers.
Thank you.
So I think, this is the relationship building. I think of, I have, students who joined our program who ended up having a program that he's trying to turn into a nonprofit in Southwest Detroit. And he does things with families. And so we've been able, because of him joining the program and now I'm on the board for him for that, building those relationships allows you to get into those spaces. I think in knowing that population and knowing how we've done the work, I know that specifically where we're working in Southwest Detroit, bilingual. So Spanish will be very important. So I'm wondering about how your game or how communication about that will be able to engage those families. Also, I'm wondering also how you talk about parents, how you define parents, because that looks differently with different families, and who they. As somebody who's also Pacific Islander, my extended family are as close as my immediate family in terms of how we relate, how we communicate, how we come together. And so just also wondering how, you operationalize, you talk about what parents mean and how you want that game to impact the family.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very, very broadly for sure, but that's really helpful to make sure that kind of stuff, is in my brain, but doesn't always get on the page, which is really helpful a reminder to make sure I read. Thank you. I will definitely reach out, Joy. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for our panelists? Vicki.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vicki. I am a current doctoral student in the EdPsych and EdTech program at MSU. So for part of my dissertation, I'm interested in collaborating with women of color in engineering and potentially understanding the different support systems, such as like internships and identity affinity groups, and how that helped either support or navigate the different identities that these women have. But one of my concerns is that I may be fully working remote next year. So I'm kind of unsure how I may navigate these relationships that I hope to build throughout my time at MSU. So I was curious to hear from, your different perspective roles, what opportunities I can participate in as someone who may be remote, and especially if these sessions may be in person next year. So what are some ways I can still stay involved as a remote individual?
In terms of our Agap community, the community that focuses on grad students and postdocs, we had some lessons learned in terms of during the pandemic, and that we might continue to have our meetings as a hybrid, moving forward. So for those who want to participate or chime in remotely, or just simply disseminate your information, to the group electronically, we're happy to help facilitate that.
Just a clarifying question, Vicki, is this for, this is undergrads? Is that, who are you, who are your participants?
Yes, undergrads.
Okay.
Specifically students probably in their later years, just because they tend to have more experience in like internships and identity affinity groups.
Okay. I will say as someone who has been, supporting students through this pandemic, they've, a lot of them have definitely jumped on to Zoom meetings and conversations. In terms of our advising numbers are probably more in the Zoom range than are in the in-person range. And so I think as long as, and I did some focus groups with our students during like the height of 2020 and when we were remote to now. And I think it's just getting them at the beginning of semesters are important. That's kind of how I handled the focus groups or handled at any interviews, because you're not too close to the midterms and the latter part. But also if you can get somebody who is a part of programs who might be able to identify and send out that email, they're more likely to respond to emails about Zoom appointments from like somebody like me. I have new staff members, and I had some students say, who is this person? Because they're still orienting. So as that relationship, as long as you communicate to any one of us in our programs, will be and give us clear explanations, we can send that information out.
Thanks, Joy. Julie?
Yeah, I wanted to say, relative to the concern about being virtual or not being virtual, kind of to echo what Joy said, I have been part of, there's the GeoCafes program that was completely virtual. And then I'm also part of the evaluator, I'm a participatory evaluator. So I'm the evaluator on a program that's called Mentoring for Life at Eastern Michigan. And it teaches graduate students how to be mentored or get mentored, how to be mentors or to be mentees. And that's completely virtual. And with careful planning, I think that the virtual experience in some ways surpasses the in-person experience. And we actually see this at MSU with instruction. So what we found, I know the folks who built all of those, oh my gosh, a pandemic, we have to teach people how to teach online, right? And what we found is that what has to happen when you're teaching online or you're doing any sort of work online, you have to plan it, right? You can't just go in like we do into classrooms sometimes and wing it. I've been part of focus groups as a researchee, where it was clear that the focus group was just being winged. I don't know what the past tense of winged, was just something that was just happening like on the fly. The person was just coming in, and you can't really do that in the same way. And so with careful pre-planning, I think actually it can be maybe even better. And I think I see Joy nodding her head a little. So maybe she's agreeing with me. I also, again, want to reiterate, if we want to use the word intersectional in this way, there are lots of people who are intersectional, right? And so I really think about student parents. We had 2 student parents who participated in our GeoCafes program last summer, who absolutely have never been able to participate in research, absolutely would not be able to come here to do research unless because they need to take care of their kids, right? And so they were able to do research and really thrive doing that research. I think the same is true for people with disabilities. I have an invisible disability, and sometimes I really can't leave this couch. And it's lovely that I can be on my couch and participate in this panel. So I think we can think of being fully virtual as a positive in some ways. This year for GeoCafes, for our research program, we're offering students an option. Some people really want to be in person, and some people want to be virtual. The last thing I'll say is, depending on what you're working on, there does have to be some real guidelines, not just for us as the out-facing program, but also for the participants, because it is easy, I think, when we're fully virtual, for some people to fall through the cracks and not participate as much as we want them to. And so we do have to have some, I don't know what those controls look like, but some sort of controls that accommodate different needs. So we allow flexibility in when people participate and how they participate, but also don't allow people just kind of fall through those cracks that maybe are easier to fall through when we're not seeing people in person. Those were my comments.
Yes, thank you so much, all of you who spoke on this issue, and from earlier for just presenting all of your knowledge from your respective communities. Really do appreciate it.
Any more questions for our panelists? All right, well, let's thank our panelists for their wisdom today and their willingness to share it with us. Yay, panelists. I put the link to the session evaluation form in the chat. Please click on that before we end the meeting so that you can complete it afterwards. As I said before, we really appreciate your feedback, and we use it to try to improve the quality of these offerings. And I hope everybody has a great week.